Find us. I'm sorry, I'm not able to.
Sir is not here yet. We'll inform you once he is here.
Yes. Then with the permission of the audience and also our panelists, I welcome Kazom to start off with her presentation. So Kazom, as you might all know, is the head of our digital programs UNDP. She catalyzes new models of collaborations to create a community of indigenous people working together to solve complex challenges. She collaborates on frontier areas that member states face to foster new models of global digital cooperation across the UN and the multilateral system. She would be able to share with us more about her experience with UNDP in fostering global digital collaborations and few implementation stories of digital public infrastructure. Over to you, Kazom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gino George, to my co-panelists who have a remarkable experiences and expertise, and certainly to all our listeners and audience members. I very much look forward to engaging with you. As Dr. Gino and colleagues in the back end pull up my presentation, I just want to mention what a distinct pleasure it is to be among some leading practitioners. And as we at the United Nations prepare for our 78th UN General Assembly, I want to stress here that today's discussion really is an important one because it explores the intersection of society and technology to solve a very important challenge of climate that impacts our planet, our people, and discussions like today feeds into the broader conversations that we have with our member states, and member states are all the countries that are members of the United Nations, on artificial intelligence, on data commons, and so on. Dr. Gino, will my slides be up shortly?
Yeah, I'm just doing it once again.
Thank you. Well, let me perhaps start by saying that we know that AI and data certainly help us advance across the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they can include any number of these goals, such as gender equality, health outcomes, climate, life above water, life below water, and so on. And therefore, the potential of artificial intelligence and data, particularly innovations that come out of this, really are significant because it can help with disaster preparedness, it can help support green transitions at an accelerated pace. And this is one of the key reasons why, if we go to the next slide, one of the key reasons why the UN Secretary General has proposed to creating data and AI commons to pool the expertise, the infrastructure within countries across borders to generate innovations to meet the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. And therefore, the UN system, including the United Nations Development Program, which many of you may know is the development arm of the United Nations, and we have engagements across 173 countries and territories. We are already starting to see some of the insights and the lessons learned from leveraging data and artificial intelligence for climate action. And of course, it goes without saying that it's clear that we are living in a climate emergency that threatens our world, and it affects us equally, sometimes unequally, but we certainly see wildfires in places like California to floods in places like Bangladesh. But we also recognize that low middle income countries are the ones that are struggling the most. They have fewer resilience mechanisms, fewer resources to face these challenges, including these AI and data capabilities to drive innovation. So we also see that the concentration of these capabilities on AI and data models in few geographies and a few companies are really risking the deepening of existing digital divides and creating new economic, political, and social dependencies within countries across borders. And I cannot stress how important the environmental impact from AI's intensive water, energy, raw material use can be including how unevenly it may be spread. And recently I saw sort of significant scarcity of water due to AI somewhere in the continent of Africa. So I think it's really important for us at UNDP that we work to really leverage the benefits of technology such as AI and data, but build on today's conversations to really try to see how to scale the green and just transitions that we want to see across the world, particularly the low-middle income countries. Here is basically our North Star. We at UNDP are trying to do this by having a very principled focus in our strategic plan on the environment. We are looking to build more resilient systems, look at some of the structural transformations, and most importantly, to make sure that no one is left behind. And if you go, maybe the slide before that, we know that the power of digital really lies in the ability to transform not just, different processes, but the way we think, the way we act, and the way we create value, as opposed to just merely optimizing for efficiency and so on, which often means getting better at the wrong things. And that includes the algorithm-based biases in data sets, discriminatory applications of AI models that can violate human rights and other legal rights of individuals and communities, and worsen violations of privacy. So we recognize that, and we recognize that no former models of institutions, of infrastructure, of governance will neatly apply to artificial intelligence. Especially as we talk about convergence points and scaling innovations using AI models and open data for climate action. And this is why, if we go to the next slide, at UNDP, we're trying to move away from product-based approaches that apply digital technologies to focusing much more ambitiously in systems approach, looking at both, digital systems to governance systems to digital corporation systems. For example, as water and sanitation systems become more digital, we are seeing opportunities to share these data streams with municipalities for the benefit of consumers in the cities. We are also seeing sanitation and water operators work with municipalities and government to map their systems and use data. And we think that with AI and data, we can really kind of, create more network systems, but also safeguard the data that start getting exchanged. But these network systems enable us to then use and unlock the innovation that's possible through these data models and artificial intelligence. And so therefore, I think for us at UNDP, the strategic focus as part of the just and green transitions really includes building that digital public infrastructure. And this includes digital transparency systems for major multilateral environmental agreements and financing mechanisms, data interoperability, or open standards that can unlock private sector innovation across countries, such as in food systems and so on. The second bit is on data and analytics, the capacity to manage and use new data sources and develop deep analytics for timely decision-making and action. And then the third bit is around empowering local green ecosystems, fishery, land management, clean energy, waste and circular economy, and so on. And such a transition cannot be possible, or rather is possible only if we apply a whole of society approach to digital transformation. with this, perhaps I want to highlight two case studies. One is, and both of them are done collaboratively with climate standard setters like UNFCCC, with World Bank, as well as with my co-panelists that you'll hear from in the government of Telangana. So this carbon registry, as a case in point, is an example that as countries work to improve their nationally determined contributions, monitoring and reporting to meet, all the requirements that are being set by Paris Climate Agreement and others and so on, we really see that, each country has very similar needs arising from these global agreements in terms of technology, but technology is not being developed equally, or is rather developed in silos and not reusable. And they certainly are not supporting interoperability, such as linking it to payment for ecosystem services schemes and so on. So here the opportunity really is to build open source, ready to install, ready to deploy systems that are built as digital public goods in cost-effective ways that are built also together with countries, countries such as Namibia and Kenya, for example, that are contributors to this carbon registry, and really set the baseline technologies with the right openness that create opportunities to realize the data innovations, the AI innovations into these systems, and really help us imagine, a more equitable carbon trading around the world between countries and people. The second example in the next slide is taking us closer to India, to home, which is the data and climate resilient agriculture, which aims to enhance the resilience of farmers through climate and weather data. It covers about 112 kilometers square, 112,000 square kilometers of land in Telangana. And it's really built as a multi-stakeholder collaboration for data sharing that involves government, research organizations, citizens, data scientists, that can really help promote that open innovation to strengthen agriculture climate resilience. And then the next slide is, really, again, to emphasize what are digital public goods. And perhaps this audience is probably very, very familiar with this. But at the UN and certainly as UNDP, we are a co-host of the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And we have defined this so that we may see countries building more open ecosystems across all the SDGs. And in the next slide is, giving some reasons for why digital public goods, but I think this audience is perhaps very much aware of the benefits of digital public goods, which is in the next slide. If we can take us all there.
Yes, you have also got the controls. You can just move it. You can use the arrow keys to move it. If you may.
Oh,
yeah.
I am looking for the arrow key.
Like just click. Give a click.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. So why digital public goods? As I mentioned and demonstrated in these two examples of the carbon registry and from the state of Telangana, the cooperation, the knowledge sharing, the reusability, the open ecosystems, and most importantly, how we can design within technology for transparency, for inclusion, for safeguards around data, but of course acknowledging that no matter how much you can build safeguards and privacy-first approaches within technology, the right governance architectures and frameworks and models are certainly necessary. In closing, perhaps Dr. Gino and the audience, we recognize that AI and data is raising many troubling questions, but we also don't, at the UN especially, we don't want to be overwhelmed by its challenges. We recognize that the early discourse around AI has centered not how much it can uplift society and solve climate challenges, but around how it could radically disrupt life as we know it. And I think this line of thinking is tainted with some cynicism, which is why we and I certainly believe that while AI is still in its nascency, we need to grab hold of its narrative and mold it in line with the ideals of inclusion, empowerment, equitability, not just in how we speak and envision a new future, but also in some of the foundational inequalities that we need to solve for. As I mentioned, the concentration of AI and models and expertise in certain countries compared to other countries. So I think with this, I think, let me just end here, Dr. Gino, and hand it back to you, and really looking forward to the questions from the audience and to also hearing my co-panelist. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kesom, for your inspiring words. And I feel like when UNDP's head of digital program is somebody like you, who in spite of the time zone difference challenges, that you were able to come here, just saying that a commitment is a committing is something that has made me the hero, made you the hero, made you my hero. So I think it's a very, very important aspect that you have brought forward, where as a community, we should work together in building this digital public goods, because data is in silos and there is no point in building different platforms in silos. It has to be done collaboratively, because climate change, unlike other environmental problems cannot be solved locally. It's a global issue. Greenhouse emissions in one place can cause a problem in another place. And now, in this time, in this planetary crisis, where we have three things at the same time, we have climate change happening at one time, we have pollution and waste, which we have already created, and we also have nature and diversity loss. It is very important for a multilateral organization like UNDP, when they can spearhead the process of building such DPGs, and also making sure that it follows certain guidelines which safeguards the privacy of people. Thanks a lot. While we wait for questions, I request all the audience, if you have questions to Kesom, please put it forward. Yes, I think we got one question. Let me just read it out. Yes, from Ishita Chakrabarti, we have one question. Could you please elaborate more on the carbon registry project in Telangana? We would be interested to hear from you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Yes.
So Ishita, thank you for your question. The carbon registry is a global digital public good that was built together by UNDP in collaboration with organizations that work on this issue, such as the World Bank, as well as the carbon sort of, or the, kind of standard setting body in climate, UNFCCC. So it's not related to Telangana. Telangana is the one where I talked about the DICRA example, data and climate resilient agriculture.
Also to Ishita, our next panelist is Rama ma'am, Rama Devi from DICRA. So she would be giving you a better perspective and would be explaining more about the DICRA project in Telangana. Okay. Another question which we got from our co-panelist Dominic: how can we work better with UNDP to produce more DPGs? So for the audience, DPGs are digital public goods, just in case there is somebody who is not working in this area but interested in climate and tech. So his question is, how can we work better with UNDP to produce more DPGs?
Thank you so much for the question, Dominic. And it's a really interesting one. Our focus thus far has been working with member states, and when I say member states, is a UN language, countries such as India, Singapore, Brazil, and a number of other countries that I'm kind of forgetting right now, to see how some of their technologies that they have used to unleash population scale impact can become reusable technologies and accessible on GitHub via the digital public goods, with some compliance metrics around safeguards, SDG alignment, and so on. So that's been our core focus. Now, as a development agency that has digital programs in 130 plus countries, we also see that there are frequently or recurring requests that is common from Morocco to Egypt to Cambodia to Argentina. And this is where we try to see what are some existing and available solutions that are digital public goods? And if there aren't, couldn't we create one so that each of these recurring requests don't end up becoming a portal or standing up as siloed systems on their own? But having said that, the flip side is that if you look in the Digital Public Goods Alliance registry, I think there are about 100 plus different DPGs, and only 10 is probably too low, but only 20 are really being reused. So I think it's really important to think of digital public goods also in the context of where there is need, where there is demand. And, are you just sort of designing in the right way to solve that problem?
Yes, thanks a lot, Kezon. We have one more question from Siddhartha Bora. He's asking, is there any way to collaborate with UNDP as an agri data analytics startup from India?
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for your question. So across our network of country offices, we do have innovation networks called the Accelerator Labs. Often our role in those labs are to generate deep insights of and help support the governments and the broader ecosystem in that country to solve the development challenges and accelerate the SDGs. So those become important touch points, such as the accelerator labs that are also based in India, for example. But it really depends, Siddharth, in terms of whether your startup is looking at pan-India challenges or global challenges or both. So would love to hear more from you, and please do feel free to reach out to me.
Yes, you're very famous. We have 3 more questions in the Q&A session. I will first take Varun Kaul's question, which is asking, historically, overly positive digital narratives have had negative effects on development ecosystem. Digitizing is the future, data is the future, leading to pitfalls, including data privacy, blindness, and governance of digital playing catch-up. Is there a balance to be found in AI narratives that UN and development organizations could adopt going forward?
Absolutely, Varun. And it's a great question. I always say the UN's job is not to digitize countries, because digitization is inevitable. It's going to happen with or without us. What we really need to focus on is the important question that you raised, Varun, and now I'm kind of lost it from the chat, or rather it's in the answered, is the important question you raised, and there's no easy answer to it, Varun. For us, as we look at digital public infrastructure systems across countries, we are also cohering it with what are the governance foundations that need to be in place with these systems. As we talk about, equity and safeguards in AI, for example, we are also recognizing that, well, the internet is actually not equal. AI expertise is not distributed equally. So there are always going to be these inequalities that are much more structural beyond a specific, innovation around digital and AI. And then lastly, especially if you think about the last mile, and especially if you think about women, often these systems replicate the gendered biases and exclusion and end up amplifying them. So I think, building or sort of taking much more gender intentional approaches, and I know it's sounding like a lot of buzzwords to you guys, but we are certainly kind of looking at it very carefully across all our systems to see what do we need to develop stronger programs around, so that we may strengthen that input from the UN side. This is very important to us as the United Nations and certainly as UNDP.
Thanks a lot, Varun. We'll just take one more question from Kushi Jain. She is majoring in digital transitions and economics. And her question is, how can we promote more collaborations between global South and North for creation of TPGs, keeping in mind the power differentials as well? So here also she's emphasizing on the inequalities.
Well, the most number of digital public goods, I think, has come from the global South right now. If you also look at digital public infrastructure, most innovations on digital public infrastructure in education, such as Diksha in India, in commerce, in health, has come from India. I think this is where it's been a great equalizer, actually, Kushi. But at the same time, we see that reusability of technology, even while it exists, is not easily discoverable, is not easily adoptable. And there are sort of deployment challenges in a number of these global South countries that we may be referring to. And there is where inequity exists, Kushi, because, digital ecosystems in every country has different levels of expertise and resources available. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yes, that is a trouble that we are also facing. Like even we have built a data model, but then in many cases, like we have a disaster reporting platform where we are the technology partner. But when we try to replicate the same thing in India, we're wondering how can people in rural villages where they don't have access to internet in the first place use this for disaster. So this is things that keep coming to us as we work in this space. Thanks a lot, Kesam, for joining. There are other questions, but in the interest of time, especially because it's very late for Kesam, she's joining us from New York. Please feel free to continue listening to the webinar or dropping off. It is up to you. Thanks a lot for joining. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gino. I've enjoyed being here, and thank you also that it's being recorded so I may listen to it later on. But I will head off now because it's 2:30 a.m. my time in New York. But thank you so much, everyone, and great to be here. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot, Kesam. Thank you. Yeah. So with that wonderful presentation by Kesam and also for Kushi, we are going to hear two more wonderful DPGs that has been developed by the Global South. We have next with us Rama ma'am. So Rama Devi Lanka, she is the Director, Emerging Technologies Officer on Special Duty. She leads the Emerging Technologies Wings of Information Technologies, Electronics and Communication Department of Government of Telangana, Delhi. She formulates and executes policy frameworks in frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud, drones, cybersecurity, and others that would create a conducive ecosystem for the growth of emerging technologies in the state. She also spearheads building institutes of excellence and assists the government in leveraging technologies to create and impact and improve lives. Over to you, Rama ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gino. Well, I think, Kesam has actually laid the foundation for my presentation. So both on regarding climate change and the various, initiatives or case studies that she has presented. While I would be actually showcasing on the initiatives that the Telangana government has actually, taken up in this area of climate change, So, yeah. First, before proceeding, let me thank you, Dr. Gino, for giving me this opportunity, to present our initiatives on what Telangana is doing.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for joining us. Please go ahead.
Just, to give a glimpse of what Emerging Technologies Wing of Telangana does is, it's a two-pronged approach that we have. And it's the first of its kind that was set up way back in 2017, where the government has taken a decision to focus on emerging technologies, realizing the potential, these technologies offer. While we started working from 2017 onwards, only in 2020, I think we actually started focusing on AI. 2020, we said, we declared or commemorated the year itself, the entire year as year of AI, and started focusing on that. Well, so for every technology, we come out with a framework that helps us to, define what the government's priorities should be and what the ecosystem needs. That's how we identified these pillars for the AI framework. And we also identified these 5 areas, while these are changing based on, the current situations like healthcare, agriculture, mobility, education, and so on. But we're also now working with Forest Department, in conservation of species, and so on. So this bottom list goes on expanding, based on the requirements and based on the problems that are there on the ground. So, before I actually proceed to the actual initiatives that we are working on, I would like to share our approach, how we are building comprehensive digital ecosystems in the state. And initially, we've chosen agriculture as the key domain because it's one of the priority sectors for government of Telangana. And we are investing hugely in infrastructure in terms of waters, building dams to provide water to farmers, giving 24/7 power. So those infrastructure needs are already taken care of. So see, now we are looking at the digital ecosystem. So it's a comprehensive, ecosystems that we are building, starting with the top one. If you look at it, it's actually putting in policy enablers in place. And under it, what is that we are doing, some of you who might be following on data privacy and so on, you might be aware that yesterday the Lok Sabha has actually, approved the data privacy bill, digital data privacy bill. Well, we have been waiting for this for quite some time. Since it's taking, time, we thought, why don't the state itself come out with a policy, or a framework to enable sharing of private data, personal data or PII data. So we actually came up with agriculture data management framework. We formulated it, worked with, held public consultations, and engaged a legal firm to help us on that. So this is ready, and happy to say that we're launching on this 11th, coming Friday. The second component under this, or the second piece, I would say, is again, agriculture data exchange, platform. And all of us know, and Kezom also spoke a lot about data, AI data. So while there is so much data available out there, it's again in silos, residing with different organizations, be it government or private sector or research institutes. We want to bring everything together on a particular platform. So we are actually, we have developed this platform. It's again a digital public good. I have a slide on that. So we are again launching this on, our minister is launching it on 11th. Then we are working on agri-tech sandboxes, because when you want to validate solutions, we have been implementing quite a number of agri-tech solutions, but it was kind of an ad hoc solution, I would admit. So now we are setting up a mechanism where, where we will validate solutions through this sandbox. It's work in progress. And a very unique concept that we are implementing is in agriculture is the agri-value chain transformation, where we are actually deploying technologies across the value chain of a crop. And we have chosen chili as the initial crop. We have completed the first season, and we are going to the second season, targeting around 50,000 farmers. Well, with this, I'll move on to the, other areas. While just to give you a glimpse of what we are working on, this is on the agriculture data management framework. As I said, we had several stakeholder consultations, and if you look at the right side, consent is the key for this framework. Just like the digital data protection bill, when any organization or individual is collecting data, or a data fiduciary is collecting data from an individual on the personal information, he or she needs to take consent, and a notice will have to be given to the, issued to the farmer. In this case, it's an agri data management framework. So we are focusing only on, data from farmers or data sets related to the agriculture domain. So we bake this framework into our agriculture data exchange platform so that the platform works, in sync with the framework. So moving on, these are the various data sets, that can be shared under this framework. So just moving on, coming to the agriculture data exchange platform, I'll spend 1 or 2 minutes on this. Well, this is again, as I said, a digital public infrastructure, or you may say digital public good, It's an open source, open standard, and interoperable public code for the agriculture sector. It's a very unique kind of thing, while we have IUDX, Indian Urban Data Exchange Platform for smart cities. But there's a totally different architecture where we're not storing data on the platform, but it's a mechanism or a platform or a technology platform that enables data exchange. So if you look at this, you have data providers where they actually make available their data through APIs, Then we have data service providers who can use this data and further, enhance it and provide. I mean, that option is also there. So at the heart is a data exchange platform, and data consumers on the right side actually can download this data. And as I said, consent management will be the key. There is a data discoverable catalog where people can look at what kind of data is available, and so on. So these are the kind of data sets we are currently using, like farmer data, crop survey, weather data, soil data. This is for initial, we have chosen 5 use cases, and we're actually making data available to those 5 use cases from Friday onwards. So once this is up and running, more use cases will be identified, and and it's open for everybody. It's not that it's only government or certain enterprises, subject to compliant to certain terms and conditions. This platform will be is a public platform, and anybody and everybody can use this platform to either host the data or provide the data or consume data. So this is a public good that we are working on. And with respect to using AI models in different projects, I've just listed out 3 projects that we are currently working here. Well, Kezom has already spoken about this DICRA, which we have worked in partnership with UNDP. This again, as she said, world's first digital public cloud on climate resilient agriculture. And it's not that just by UNDP and Telangana government, but about 9 organizations and more than 100 data scientists have worked on this particular platform. And data again is sourced from public data sets across the world actually to develop this platform. It's kind of a plug and play platform where in fact, after we did it for Telangana, UNDP has taken it to other states. I think they have implemented this for more than 5 states in India. So it's that easy to actually implement. Well, there's certain parameters, that actually are collected in this. For example, if you look at, soil, organic carbon, soil moisture, crop fires, and so on, these parameters help us to actually define or identify where, climate resilient practices are being adopted in different villages across Telangana. It's around 21,000 habitations that we are looking at. And based on these, positive or, best practices, you can say, this we want to identify such practices and, emulate it in other areas. While, most of the farmers in India, as most of, might be aware that small holding farmers, they just own 2 to 3 acres of land. So while we believe that this tool is going to really help in identifying, such areas where actually areas that are practicing, climate resilient practices. So this we have implemented in the state of Telangana, and there are other areas also that these are on the right side. If you look at, these are the different data sets that have gone into this platform related to environmental, broadly 3 areas, so socio-economic, environmental, and infrastructure. So all these, the details of all these, areas are available in the platform, and customer advisors to advisories to 21,000 villages can be now actually sent through this platform. So this provides not just the current data, but historical and decadal patterns. As I said earlier, like to understand the what farmlands are actually adopting climate resilient practices and replicate those in in the vulnerable farmlands is the idea, you know. These are about DICRA actually. And these are some of the artifacts that have we have developed out of the platform on warehouses, on soil moisture condition. You know, right now, soil is the biggest, I would say, area that's most vulnerable for because of overuse of pesticides. You know, the soil quality has degraded, and now we're looking at how to actually improve the soil quality. So, and socioeconomic factor, there's a relative wealth index between different villages. And the last one is, how is the land use? I mean, this is a standard map. You can see land use and coverage. So these are some of the artifacts. Now, moving on to other areas, you know, while this could be, it's a smart nutrition management of soil is what we title the project. It's actually portable AI tool, you know, that's developed by a startup called Krishi Tantra for testing soil, not just the NPKs, the 3 primary parameters, but all the other 12 micronutrients. So it's a portable machine. It's not actually displayed here on the screen. The farmer can use, you know, just dig out his soil, and using this portable machine can identify the, deficiency in the soil and can take suitable actions. And one key, the current practice is just dump as many fertilizers as possible, as much pesticide as possible. That's the current trend, you know. Well, this actually gives the farmer the exact, parameters where the soil is deficient and helps him to, take corrective actions in the sense, only those kind of fertilizers or micronutrients can be applied to the crop. So optimally fertilized is what we are looking at. Optimal fertilization is what we are looking at from this particular solution. And it's actually been identified as one of the best solutions by Digital India Awards, and on the right, if you look at, the Prime Minister has conferred this award. And, and you can see the startup also receiving this award from the President of India. So this is one such kind of solution that we have implemented in Telangana. And the other one is smart irrigation management. Again, excessive use of water, we have noticed in several villages in Telangana. It's more or less the same across India too. So we have again, we work mostly with startups, from Telangana mostly, and from across India also, if there is a unique solution, innovative solution. So it's an IoT based, irrigation solution, which actually, based on the soil moisture condition, it triggers the solution irrigation, So this has been successfully implemented. And there are several other projects that we are working on, because I actually haven't put because of the time constraint. And KZOM was talking about carbon registry. And in fact, we haven't put it in this presentation, but we're also working on a very unique project where we are actually, tracking the reduction in the carbon emissions for various projects, like, like converting regular street lights into LED lights, and EV, where EVs are being used, all those initiatives were actually to track the savings in, carbon emissions, or you may call it carbon credits. We're actually designing a platform where it's an end-to-end kind of solution, right from, it monitors the generation of carbon credits, then it actually validates its MRV, monitoring, then recording and validation. Entire chain is being digitized, and we are actually implementing it with startups. So, but carbon registry is something we would definitely be looking at. Of course, KZOM has left, but we would be happy to look at it. Well, I'll pause here, Dr. Gino. So.
Thanks a lot, Rama ma'am. It is so inspiring to see the work Government of Telangana is doing, and how you are spearheading the whole process. You are definitely an inspiration for many. And like how Keso mentioned that there is a need for an integrated platform, and Telangana government is already there. They have created DICRA. They also have smart soil, smart irrigation. I'm so impressed. Like, and is there any way where the inputs that the recordings from the smart soil goes back into the DICRA platform? Is there any connection between the two, or is that in the process?
Yeah, it's in the process. In fact, we're working on another project called Sago Bago. As I said, value chain, right? We are looking at how to integrate this value chain. It's called, Sago Bago in Telugu, good cultivation or advanced cultivation. We're looking at how to integrate this with DICRA. Yes.
Okay. So that is so inspiring, and also smart irrigation. I think that is very relevant, because all the water crisis that we face in urban areas, it is not because water is being consumed in urban areas. It is because 90% of the water is being utilized in the irrigation areas. And when we bring in these smart technologies, that brings a lot of change, especially in a country like India, where a lot of people still are dependent on farming for agriculture, and also our resources are conducive to farming. How do we maximize it using technology? I think you are an inspiration for many, ma'am. Thanks a lot. We have a question from Siddhartha Bora. He says, hello, ma'am. Congratulations on the initiatives taken up on various agri-data programs. Is there any way for startups to utilize this data to deliver insights on climate-resilient crop practices?
Yeah, sure, Siddharth. In fact, as I said, edX will be launched this Friday onwards. And you can actually, look at the various data sets that will be available, on the platform, and can actually register yourself and, download the data. But initially, from the government side, we are actually making available a lot of data of the farmers, so you can, explore post 11th this Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is one of the core fundamental idea of DPGs also, where the data would be open, the methodology should maybe also be open, so that it encourages other collaborators to work together. Because as mentioned before, climate change is not a local problem, it's a global problem, and people need to work together to solve it. We also have another question from Nagarjan Krishnamurthy. Can AI concentrate on environment and disaster impact assessments? So he is asking another sector. Yes.
Yes, Nagarjan, because I've restricted myself to agriculture here, but there are other areas that we're very keenly working on. Environment is one of our favorite areas where we are exploring solutions that actually help in preventing environmental pollution and so on. Please do let us know if you have any use cases in this. We are we'll be happy to actually pilot them. Disaster impact assessment, yes, that's another area that AI has great potential. We haven't done much on that yet, but one area maybe probably you guys can help us out is urban flooding is one of the biggest problems across India, including Hyderabad. It just, the flash floods, they just happen in a few minutes, and 8 centimeters, 10 centimeters rain falls, and the infrastructure is not able to take that load. So is there, in fact, we tried it out, but somehow we partnered with JNTU and tried to develop a solution that actually wants, sends alerts to the department saying in each of these locations, this much centimeter of rainfall, and this is the inundation. So the government can actually, divert their resources to the most, place that where it's inundated. So, but somehow that didn't take off. But if any one of you have such kind of solution to approach us, we'll be happy to explore and, take it forward.
Yeah, so at Civic Data Lab, we ourselves, I'm just taking this platform to tell 2 solutions that we have. One is we are a technology partner with Cognicity, which is again a platform where citizens can report disasters then and there. And one of the use cases, it's in Indonesia, where they report flood disasters, and it connects citizens to the governments on a real-time basis. So so I can share with you our first climate dialogue series, where NASHIM actually presents this case, and we are the technology partner for that. And also in SM, we ourselves have a disaster risk reduction data-driven model for flood specifically, where we work with ASDMA, and now the experts at ASDMA is helping us fine-tune this model. So it is a multivariate statistical model which tries to capture the multidimensional nature of flood disasters by taking different data from by taking around variables from more than 20 data sources. There is around 80 variables. We bring them all together in one place, and then we run a model over it. And then it basically derives 4 or 5 derived variables like flood hazard, socioeconomic vulnerability, the government response to floods, which would help the government decide where should the funds be allocated on a yearly basis or on a quarterly basis as and when it is run. Another question we have from Dhruvi Goyal is, would the methodology, so he is also asking the same thing, like would the methodology along with the raw data used for soil moisture prediction, LULs, land use, land cover maps, biodiversity be available in the platform for others to use and contribute in the mission?
Yeah, it's a digital public good, open source, open platform, so anybody can actually access that data. Yeah, that's the whole, concept of digital public goods. Yes.
Yes, thanks a lot, ma'am. Like it is so inspiring to see, and especially when it is being led by a woman, it gives me so much more. It's so much more inspiring, and I hope that there are a lot of people who would follow your pathways. Thanks a lot, ma'am. With that, and there was one more question which was actually addressed to Kesam, but I think you would also be in a good position to answer that. It is from Anirudh. How can data science or AI help non-profit organizations improve their functioning or heighten their impacts?
Non-profits. How can AI help non-profits in
improve their functioning?
It depends on what kind of function you are looking at. I'm not sure if it's a financial, domain that you are looking at. Yes, definitely AI can help in predictive analysis, carry out analysis and help you identify or predict, what would be a future cost and so on. So it depends on what kind of, within your organization, what is the kind of area that you are looking into it. Yeah.
Yes, so AI basically has the potential to go work across sectors, and it is up to each one of us to see how it can be put into a good use. Like Rama ma'am and Kezom has showed us, and how Dominic will show us how it can be put for climate action for the social good as a whole. Now it is up to each one of us how to use it responsibly. Thanks a lot, Rama ma'am. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking your time out of your busy schedule and joining us. And if you have any more questions to Rama ma'am, please put it on the Q&A box while we move on to our last panelist of the day. And we are also waiting for JD Tripathi sir, who was supposed to have joined us, and he is currently in another meeting. But while we wait for him, let us go to our next panelist, which is Dominic Licott, founder, Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technological Officer of Serolytics. He is popularly known as Doc. He is the founder of Serolytics, a social impact AI company and data ethics PH, an online community focused on social issues such as data privacy, data security, AI-driven discrimination, data liability, data ownership rights, and data poverty. He is 3-time global winner of NASA and ESA International Space Apps Challenges. His team's award-winning dengue surveillance application AIDAS has been backed by the Group on Earth Observations and Digital Public Goods Alliance and the UNICEF Innovation Fund. We are so grateful to have him on here. He would be able to tell us more about how Serolytics uses open source digital goods to address the collective social problems. Over to you, Dominic.
Thank you, Dr. Gino, and thank you for having me. And I'm very humbled to be part of this panel of distinguished experts. So allow me to spend a few minutes just to show you what we've been up to. Some of these projects date back to the pandemic, so they'll have a very COVID or health centricity to it. I'm going to divide the time between 3 sections. First, I want to run through some design patterns. I'll just call it design patterns. Basically, as a tech startup, as a research startup, this is kind of the Lego blocks that we play with when we come up with solutions. And then I'll run through 2 of the 3 projects that you mentioned that have won international awards. One is about dengue, and the other one is about mobility. Okay, so some design patterns. So I think we've heard a lot of good frameworks and approaches to encouraging more digital public goods and more climate-centric solutions. So I'll share with you maybe kind of the top 5 things that we look at. These are all open source, data or methods that you can easily use for ideation or designing projects for your own your own work. First is obviously I don't think we've ever been in a time when it's been easier to get geospatial and Earth observation data. So if you go to Google Earth Engine, you can easily extract any satellite view you want. And ESA and NASA also provide open access to their satellite data. Like Sentinel is the ESA's portal for this. I think it's mostly free, but there's also higher resolution data available for a small fee. But even if you wanted to get higher resolution data, you can always apply for a small research grant where they give you free access to pretty much any asset you want. So it's worth exploring. Another data set that we love to use is blending geospatial data with digital data. For example, social listening is an example of that. Looking at Google Trends, for example, looking at social media data, which can, in a way, is a venue where you can marry both kind of the social behavior of people and kind of the Earth observation, more of natural science. This was particularly helpful for us in both projects, especially the dengue detection application, which I'll show you later. Some of you might be familiar with network analysis. So if you're familiar with this, it's a branch of mathematics that looks at connections. The nice thing about network analysis is it's very basically it can tolerate any kind of data. You can draw connections between people, you can draw connections between events, you can draw connections between let's say even satellite phenomena. The idea is once you build a network, the tools of network analysis can help you identify which particular parts of that network are useful. Centrality, for example, and significance. For example, one of our favorite life hacks is to use road networks. You can extract road network data from OpenStreetMap and then treat that as a graph that you can apply network analysis on. So you'll know, for example, which parts of a city are more prone to accidents, which parts of a city are more prone to disease, just by looking at the layout of a city. And of course, cities in India are very similar to cities in the Philippines. They don't come in nice, neat squares and grids like for the rest of the world. So we found that using road network data as an input into a model can be quite useful. And then finally, from a design standpoint, a lot of our work has to do with dashboards. So we found kind of 4 types of dashboard designs quite helpful. This is not to say there's only 4 types of dashboards, but we found these 4 archetypes seem to work very well, especially when you're looking at social impact, when you're looking at climate. So design 1 is interpretation. So any dashboard that helps users, especially non-technical users, draw connections and correlations between events, between factors, and I'll give you a framework on that as well. Second is anything that gives people the ability to decide, like decision support. So anything that helps you prioritize, do trade-offs, do ranking, do scoring. It's a good way of automating an otherwise manual decision process. Third archetype is a planning tool, anything that helps with forecasting, trends, simulations, scenarios, very useful, especially when you're talking to decision makers who don't just want to know what's happening now, but they want to know where it's going to go. And then lastly, probably the most popular is a control dashboard. Like you want to monitor thresholds, you want to look at risks, detect anomalies. So these are all not mutually exclusive. So when you're trying to build tools, I usually start with these 4. Like, okay, so what's the problem? Oh, we have a dengue problem. Okay, so what do we really want to know about dengue? Do we want to monitor it? Do we want to plan for it? Do we want to help, health workers make decisions? Or is there already a lot of data available, but we need a way of managing the relationships of that data? So using this as a bench, there was a question earlier about how you can use AI and data science to address issues. This is a good starting position. And then you use the data I mentioned earlier from satellites, social media, even road networks, and then try to use that to relate to whatever phenomena you're trying to address. And a good way of putting it together is a risk management framework. So we found Inform. There are many risk management frameworks, but we found Inform particularly compelling. Inform was developed by the European Union. It's the idea here is when you're measuring a risk, it's not just about looking at adverse events. That's just 1/3. That's the hazard. It's good to juxtapose that with two other dimensions, the vulnerability of a population and kind of the resilience or coping capacity of a location. So one is event-based, this is population-based, and this is location-based. See, and if you're able to cross those three dimensions, you can come up with so many combinations of insight. Like you might have a particular outbreak of whatever, dengue or COVID. But if it's, let's say, a relatively young population, let's say in the case of COVID, it's deadlier to older people, you wouldn't be too worried about a population that's relatively young, or vice versa. If it's an older population, they're higher risk. And then you can look at location-specific factors, like you can use the maps, the road networks, you can use the number of hospitals per square kilometer, whatever data you can get from open source to come up with this three-dimensional view of an issue. So it's not just measuring the phenomena, you're also looking at how much it could affect a population, whether a population has demographic characteristics or not, and looking at how that location can be conducive to the phenomena or actually resilient to that phenomena. So I hope that gives you some high-level view of how we like to think of things. Okay, so let's be more specific. So I'm going to share two projects. Both have been award winners. And one of the reasons we feel that they were recognized is they're more than just like data scraping tools, because there's a lot of those. Certainly we need those, but there are also tools that can help with decision making, planning, monitoring, and interpretation, as I mentioned earlier. So this one is kind of our, I would say, our favorite project. It continues to be recognized up to today. We competed in the NASA Space Apps Challenge in 2019 for this. This is right before COVID became popular. It was dengue that was an issue in the Philippines. And since then, it continues to be supported, most recently by UNICEF Innovation Fund. So in a nutshell, the thought process was we wanted to capture dengue from a data perspective. And that has a climate component, that has a digital component, and of course, the reports being provided by the government. We can't measure everything, so we don't know where the mosquitoes are. It's hard to find them. But we do know mosquito conducive environments based on research, and then we can correlate that with satellite data. At the same time, we could measure social behavior through Google searches, how many people are searching for dengue, similar to the Google flu trends. And then finally, we can then relate both to the actual physical incidence of dengue or deaths because of dengue as monitored by the government. So it's a three-prong approach. We listen for trends, we do machine learning to predict cases, and we use satellite data to identify locations that you could intervene in. So this was during the time when we were doing our first scan. Google searches for dengue, obviously some are higher than others. And there's also an interesting seasonality to it. November, December, July, August, November, December, July, August. So that thing is something that is very conducive to machine learning if you can detect patterns. At the same time, looking at other data sets that we could get from the weather service, like the humidity, temperature, rainfall in that location, which then allowed us to, in a way, relatively directionally predict where dengue is. I mean, it was less about the number of cases per se. It was more about, is there going to be an increase or decrease? And we kind of got, I mean, just during 2019, we kind of got the trends pretty well. The curves fit very well. But the compelling thing was when we looked at satellite data and specifically thresholds of vegetation and water, we could then, in a way, identify which areas were more conducive to dengue habitats, or rather mosquito habitats, which now gives a local government or health service an area where they could intervene. So it's not enough to just tell them, hey, look, our trends are showing dengue is about to spike. You should go to this particular area in the city and then see what's happening there. This is later during the UNICEF Innovation Fund, we were now enhancing the model using computer vision. So not only looking at the actual pixel values of the indicators, but looking at an entire area as if it was a picture or an image, and then correlating that with an outbreak indicator. So then we would have this overall map of the Philippines, and then from a risk perspective, identify which areas were, being potentially hit by dengue. So in a nutshell, we were able to, launch this in 2019. It's being modified every year. Up to now, we're still modifying it. The current version looks something like this. It's an easy dashboard that health services can use to zero in on a location and at the same time give them a prediction of whether the trend is up or down. It's kind of like a weather report. At the same time, we were able to use the same framework during the COVID pandemic and apply the risk framework, again, using similar technologies to look at COVID trends. And I'll talk more about COVID trends in the second project. We're happy that NASA recognized it. This, in a way, if you're a startup, it's good to get that recognition in a way and bring it to the attention of many other people. So NASA was a good lead to getting the EO for SDG award, and the EO for SDG award put us in the radar of UNICEF, and UNICEF were the ones who actually mentored us to becoming a digital public good. And we are currently being incubated, or at least this application is currently being incubated. This year, we actually got another award from Geovation. So we're one of the highly commended projects. I think the whole point of all these awards is really to spread the word that these technologies are useful. So as a digital public good, everything we have is open source. It's uploaded on a public repository. People continue to download it. Usually people who want to compete in the NASA Space Apps Challenge, but at the same time, people who have other challenges, similar challenges, are able to use the same technology. In fact, for the years of 2021 to 2022, or no, 2020 to 2022, for 3 years, we were pretty much just rebooting the same platform to do other things like food security. We were also looking at tuberculosis. Gideon was another project where we won the NASA challenge. It was more about correlating night lights with economic output. It's another satellite indicator you can use, and then use that as a prioritization mechanism for COVID interventions. So there's so much data that's available. I think the effort will really be looking at relationships, modeling those correlations, and then later coming up with a tool. Okay, MAQI was a more recent initiative. This is when the COVID pandemic was already kind of in its last legs within the last 24 months. And the idea was, the mission that ESA wanted was, you have all of these data sets available on there. They have a EO dashboard, but people weren't using them. That's the problem. So we came in and made some suggestions about, hey, look, you've got Sentinel Hub. That's also part of the ESA platform. Sentinel Hub allows you to create customized indicators. So if you're not happy with kind of the standardized vegetation, water, moisture, etc. index, you can come up with customized one. Our approach was, how can we relate the satellite data for, let's say, air quality? So PM2.5, PM5, particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, NO2, even sulfur dioxide, and relate it to human activity. So in the same way we related satellite data with Google searches in ADs, we would now relate air quality data with some other data set. And at that time, unfortunately, it's no longer available. Google and Apple and Facebook were publishing these mobility indices, and it showed how many people were, at home, how many people were in the groceries, etc. And we thought, hey, look, maybe if we related that to air quality, we could find some insights. And we christened that indicator MAQI. So we say, what is the relative mobility in that location as reported by Google? And what is the relative air quality in that location as reported by all these satellite data? Of course, these are two separate sources, so we had to make sure we could marry them from a temporal and a location perspective. So some data gaps or something that we needed to overcome. But it was a fairly straightforward exercise. So you get the raw feed, you scale it a bit, and then you come up with some sort of a ratio of mobility index over, let's say, nitrogen dioxide. And in addition to that, we wanted to show that, okay, so what if you're able to come up with a mobility index? How does that affect behavior? At that time, we still had the COVID pandemic going on. So we said, why don't we look at the ever popular reproductive number? as a way of establishing behavior. So we added that as a third data set. And the result was really good. I still have a few more minutes. First, on the mobility and the air quality, there was certainly a relationship. So these are 6 plots showing the different mobility indices provided by Google as it related to the NO2 index that we created using satellite data. So the immediate output of that is something like this. We were able to identify areas in the Philippines which had a relatively high mobility to changes in air quality. So that's good. So people are moving around, but air pollution wasn't being generated, or the other way around. People aren't moving so much, but that somehow air quality was spiking for some reason. And we found that that indicator was actually quite predictive of COVID, for that matter. And that's interesting. So this is a plot of the COVID cases over a period. And this is the plot where we use the MAQI index to predict the number of likely COVID cases, and it fit relatively well. And that also got us the technology award for that hackathon. So anyway, again, going back, maybe the main lesson I want to share here is, apart from the opportunities that exist within satellite data, it's tremendously more insightful to combine it with other data sets that are also open, that are also available, and see if you can find a relationship. Like, for example, changes in the climate could relate to dengue cases, and the glue in the middle was the dengue searches as a way of bridging the gap. Or here we could show that changes in air quality could actually be predictive of COVID cases, and the glue in the middle was the mobility data. So it's always not just looking at changes in the climate alone, but it's also changes in how people behave. And then you can find interesting, correlations with some other phenomena. I think this is a new field, relatively new field, where you blend data, because we noticed that people who work with, Earth observations, they tend to stick to Earth observations. People who look at social metrics or data, they tend to stick with the, let's say, social media. But if you're able to bring it together, it can really unearth a lot. And then you bring in the other frameworks like risk management and, dashboards, so that you can allow people to interact with it. So that's pretty much it. I hope you picked up a few things, and let me know if you have any questions on the slides or the projects. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dominic. Now I know why everybody calls you Doc. Yeah, thanks for the scientific, for explaining things in such a concise manner, and also to showcase how things can be approached in a scientific manner. Before we go to the question and answer session, I would like to invite J.D. Tripathi sir, because he has joined us now. He's a keynote speaker and he has just got out from a meeting. So I would like to welcome him to give his remarks on this webinar and so on. So J.D. Tripathi sir is the Principal Secretary to Government of Assam Revenue and Disaster Management Department. He is also the Chief Executive Officer of Assam State Disaster Management Authority, Government of Assam, India. He has been instrumental in several digital initiatives such as Vasundhara 2.0, mapping different public utilities on GIS for disaster management, Bhunaksha, daily flood damage and response management system, which is called FRIMS, where they upload on a daily basis flood reports and also how it is being managed. And he is also instrumental in formulating the Assam DRR roadmap. Over to you, sir, for a few remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Zero Jazz, and I can also see Gaurav and other distinguished panelists who have made presentation. So Mr. Masali, the head of digital programs, Rama Devi Lanka, and Dominic, whose presentation I could see a little bit. So thank you very much. In fact, I'm really honored to be part of such a high quality webinar. And we are talking about issues like data and issues like open data, so data democratic provision of data and all these things. It's really very encouraging and fascinating for all of us. So here, when we are in the Revenue and Disaster Management Department or in Assam State Disaster Management Authority, the knowledge which you have assembled today, I think we are going to be one of your consumers of the knowledge. Basically, we are not the knowledge per se, but we are a great consumer of knowledge. So whatever knowledge you are assembling from different sources, we have the projects to actually move on. So when we are talking what kind of projects we are having, so two issues which we deal with the revenue, that is the land management, the relationship between the human and the land, known as title. So how the titles are to be made robust in the state of Assam, and when there are problems in managing maps, in managing land records, then that leads to a very significant land governance risk. How to manage that risk, land governance risk, it's something what is our job, and where we are basically looking for the opportunities to manage, minimize, and make our titles robust. So that is basically one big ticket area where we are looking for the partnerships. The second is related to the land governance risk is our disaster risk, which is basically coming from multiple disasters which the state is prone to, vulnerable to, and it is facing year in and year out. So for that, how to reduce the risk of the disaster by way of undertaking the mitigation strategies, undertaking disaster risk strategies, the climate action, the climate resilient steps, what we can do, how we can improve our data governance systems, how we can standardize the data which we are having. So one such experiment, as you rightly pointed out, is we were facing problem when the flood season starts from 15th May to 31st of October. So in that period, we are to present the report to the media, to the people, to the whole world, that how many people have been affected, how many people are in relief camps. So those data, it was a nightmarish experience for the Assam State Disaster Management Authority, because collecting manually from over 155 circles, then aggregating it and presenting it in a proper form using the manual methods was totally unacceptable. And with introduction of the FRIMS, at least that one need has been totally addressed. And now we are moving to the next level, that using that data and using that experience of FRIMS, now we are going towards the DRIMS, that disaster related information and data management system. So that is the next platform which we are integrating into. When it comes to this land risk, we are in the form of doing the survey of around 40,000 square kilometer area of Assam, where we are making the maps which are as accurate as 1 centimeter. So 1 centimeter level accuracy maps we are preparing and keeping in the form of a layer that will be the cadastral map layer, and that we will facilitate to the people that, okay, if you have a parcel of land, you know your textual records, this is your parcel, you want an authenticated map, you just make an application digitally and get it as a shape file or PDF file or KML file in a GIS workable format. So these are the things, two things that I can mention. One is our DRIMS, that is really a kind of a dream for us to have a common system for all disasters in Assam. And the second is to facilitate people that they can have their up-to-date land records along with a very high quality GIS map on the fingertips of their mobile phone. These are the two things on which we are working. I will not speak much here. I will just stop. And if there will be questions, we can handle that. And I have a time constraint because I'll have to leave this place at 1 p.m. because I'm to attend another meeting for cabinet meeting tomorrow in Delhi. So that is why this time constraint I'm saying, please excuse me for that. Thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your remarks and also for telling us the different initiatives that ASDMA is up to. So ASDMA is a consumer of knowledge, and they also are a body of experts. So we are proud to say that we have been associating ourselves with ASDMA for over a year now for building a data model on flood disaster risk reduction. And currently, the experts at ASDMA is helping us to fine tune this model. So and it's all with JD Tripathi sir's leadership and all the experts out there, they have created a very conducive environment for different people to come collaborate and work together in our this initiative of building digital public goods for climate action, which is much appreciated by CTL and also by anybody who is involved with ASDMA. Thanks a lot, sir, for taking your time and coming over and joining us in this webinar. With that, I will go back to questions to Dominic. Dominic, with your permission, sir, I'm going back to Dominic to take the questions that the audience have directed towards him. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, please carry on.
Hello, Doc. We are back to you and we would like to get certain insights from you. So there are people who have already put some questions on the chat. But before that, I myself am curious to know more about Zerolix. Can you tell us the journey of Zerolix and what was the motivation behind starting Zerolytics?
Yeah, so certainly. Conceptually, we started in 2016, but we were registered in 2017. The original idea was to bring, because my background actually came from financial services, where I worked for more than 15 years, and then IT. But all of my work was with big corporations, and the idea was to democratize data to small and medium enterprises. We ventured into training, just as data science and analytics was becoming popular. So this was kind of 2016, 2017. And then sometime 2018, we kind of had this, identity crisis, where we said, certainly there's more to data science than just, doing charts and graphs for companies. And that's when we started to do a pivot into social impact through hackathons. We joined hackathons, and then later we enjoyed the process so much we started hosting our own hackathons. And the COVID pandemic was both the best and the worst thing to ever happen to us, because it completely eliminated all commercial work. But then it opened up a lot of humanitarian related work. So that's how I got exposed to the UN system, the UNDP, WHO, UNICEF, who had a lot of COVID related work, but not necessarily just related to monitoring. Like we also did some work in human rights. We also did work in food security, all triggered by the pandemic. So that's how we got into this process of bringing the skills we already had from the commercial sector, but then getting into the impact sector. And then the UNDP work and UNICEF work was most especially helpful because it exposed us to how SDGs are monitored, how to do monitoring and evaluation of projects. And I think it was a perfect merger, because in kind of the UN type work, there's a lot of data, but not enough people who knew enough to kind of bring the data together, unless you were going into the kind of the hardcore research sector, who are also involved. I think people were clamoring for, more agile solutions. And I think now it's being crystallized with digital public goods, for example. Like you need solutions that can easily be deployed, can be repeatable. So I think we fit that niche perfectly. And then now, more recently, just as the pandemic was winding down, other social issues are taking center stage. Obviously, climate is one, gender is another. We're also looking at food security as an area of interest. And of course, public health continues to be there, but other diseases. We felt that going back to education would be perfect for us. So now we're making it's not a hard pivot, slightly different direction, focusing more on capacity building, teaching government, teaching NGOs how to use data. And of course, the current buzz now is artificial intelligence. So we're incorporating generative AI into that mix as well. But everyone loves talking about, art and copyright and all that. Our focus is currently on design thinking. how we can combine design thinking and AI towards solving a specific social issue. So that's what's keeping us busy right now.
Thanks a lot, Doc. There is one more question. Are there specific types of mobility data that are more informative for accurately estimating air quality? For example, does vehicular traffic data have a different impact than pedestrian movement data?
Yeah, so I gave an answer here. The way Google and Apple and Facebook were generating their data sets, I think Apple could tell you what kind of transportation mode, was it pedestrian or trains or cars. Unfortunately, they didn't give too much location specific data. The Google data set, on the other hand, was very location specific, but it was more about which locations on the map were people in. Like, are they at home? Are they in a grocery? Are they at work? Or are they in the parks? So it's not necessarily type of transpo, but more of where they are. So that's how they measured mobility. And we found that it's the residential mobility that was highly predictive. Because obviously, if you're at home, you're not traveling. But if you're not at home, then you're probably moving around. Well, what we found that obviously in data science, you can blend all of these factors together to come up with a predictive indicator. And that's what we did with the air quality indicator. So we put them all together, looked at the correlation, and then the resulting index itself became predictive of COVID, which we found really mind-blowing. And right now we're still looking at follow-on research. Obviously, COVID is so 2022, but now we're trying to explain why would that be the case. And there is already supporting evidence for that. Obviously, the more people moving around, the more susceptible they are to getting infected. And secondly, the air quality is also a good proxy for, because everyone, WHO especially, got a lot of flack for kind of holding back on the fact that the COVID is an airborne disease. We're all worried about infected surfaces, but not about traveling viruses. But I think now it's kind of an accepted fact. It's airborne. So therefore, the quality of the air affects kind of the transmission of the disease. But we were detecting that empirically long before the canon literature was already confirming it. So we found that also interesting. So I think other startups and researchers may have the similar experience where you're looking at the empirical evidence. It seems to indicate a relationship, but then you don't have any official research confirming it yet. Just hang on to that data set because later on it might prove useful.
That is very interesting. Like, so you just remind me how so far from in the age of industrialization, we have engineered ourselves into all these problems. And now we have innovators like you to take us out of it. It is so good. So we at CDL, we are also tech enthusiasts. And so our director has a question for you. What are the modeling or AI use cases you are working on gender and food security?
Okay, for food security, it was an interesting one. During the time we were looking at predicting possible causes for hoarding of food items, because if you have lockdowns, the traveling of food from farm to table is affected. So we were relying a lot on social media for that. But at the same time, the geospatial component came in, where we were now looking at multi-year trends. Like, okay, if a vegetation index starts dipping, that might indicate a potential shortage of whatever, like agricultural commodities. And does that precede kind of incidences of social issues related to overpricing, hoarding, etc.? So that was the angle. Apart from monitoring kind of the trends in terms of food movement. While for, what was the original one? Food security, gender. Yeah, so the gender angle is more along human rights, because during the pandemic, obviously related to lockdowns, there were reports of abuse related to, COVID passes and lockdowns, or incidences of, all sorts of misbehavior. And what we were looking to prove, which we actually had some emerging evidence for, is I'm sure in India you had similar experiences where you had varying levels of lockdowns. So for us, we had we had terms like high, medium, or low, or general quarantine, extended quarantine, enhanced quarantine. So we now had this, in a way, policy indicator that we could track over time. And then we checked social media and Google whether the changes in the quarantine classifications by location was driving, let's say, searches for human rights related issues like searches for food, searches for gender abuse, etc. And we found that there was, we're still compiling the information on why that would be the case, of course. But it showed that even in the human rights sector, there's not enough research being done on kind of the more big data and quantitative stuff. Most human rights research is focused on qualitative insight. So I think that's an open opportunity. How can you look at all of this qualitative research and start backing it up with some more quantitative indicators? Yeah, it's a work in progress. But we were able to work with UN Women and UNHCR to do this kind of analysis, and obviously they want to start compiling more evidence for possible gender related abuses.
It's so good to know how you are identifying the things that actually matter, and then you understand the impacts. Thanks a lot, Dominic, Doc, for joining us. And with that, we are at time. Thank you all for joining us. I thank especially the panelists for taking their time out of their busy schedules, preparing their presentations, and also sharing their insights for all the questions that we and the audience have had. Thanks a lot. I also thank all the audience for taking the time out of their own busy schedules and joining it and making this webinar as interactive as it can be. And I also thank all the people who has been working behind the scene, the team at CDL, the team at IIC, and also the Rockefeller Foundation who has supported us through all the webinars to put this webinar together. Thanks a lot. And on a last note, I would request all of us to ponder over all that we have heard and continue to support each other in our efforts to build DPTs. Thank you all for joining. Sorry for extending. I think we can